I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, what may be the biggest hack on the U.S. in history is still unfolding. Even Microsoft found the fingerprints of the attackers inside its systems. Microsoft President Brad Smith joins us on what he is calling a moment of reckoning for companies and governments around the world. Plus, Google is now the target of multiple lawsuits by U.S. states and the federal government. But experts say the burden of proof is high. What are the chances the world's largest search engine could be broken up? And the popular dating app Bumble, where women make the first move, joins the IPO craze, filing paperwork to go public. CEO Whitney Wolfe Herd is our guest tonight on Bloomberg Studio 1.0. But first, lawmakers are still wrangling over a stimulus deal, and talks are likely to continue into the weekend. This as cases of COVID-19 are spiking across the country. California just issuing an emergency alert urging Bay Area residents to stay home in my neighborhood and beyond after the ICU capacity fell below 15%. Triggering a mandatory shelter in place. I want to get straight to Bloomberg's Abigail Doolittle to walk us through the market moves of the day. And obviously, Abigail, all eyes on stimulus.
Certainly all eyes on stimulus, and markets very, very jittery dealing with all these different factors that you were just talking about. Plus, on top of it, just from a technical standpoint, today, Emily, is something called quadruple witching day, basically the expiration of a lot of different futures and options, creates extra volatility. The rebalance for the S&P 500, in addition, creating a ton of volatility. Net, though, for the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ and most of the major averages, it was a bullish week. The NASDAQ 100 climbing by nearly 3% on the week. So investors looking past the fact that we still don't have stimulus, that you do have some of these technical factors at play, along with the rising virus cases. You were just mentioning San Francisco. Here in New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo today said that new virus cases in New York above 12,000 for the first time during the pandemic. So despite that seemingly not so great news, stocks higher. Helping out the NASDAQ 100 the most is Apple. Apple up 3.5%. This, of course, earlier this week, Nikkei publication in Japan put out a bullish message around Apple, saying that they're likely to increase the production of their iPhones by 30%. That's no small number. That brought up the entire Apple complex, including Skyworks. And then you have Tesla. Look at this, Emily. It's just unbelievable. This stock is, truly on fire. Here we have it on the week, up 14%. Ahead of right at the close being added to the S&P 500. Lots of volatility there. Some wondering that on the 21st, will that be a sell the news moment, or at some point after the 21st, but certainly into it. All investors wanting in on Tesla as index managers forced to buy it. And then Airbnb in its second week up 13%. So that's really what worked and drove the markets higher. However, Emily, to finish, and I'm not doing this to end on a down spot, it is sort of interesting to see that we have this positive news in the real world on Moderna and Pfizer this week around their vaccines. Of course, Pfizer's vaccine out there being distributed. It seems as though Moderna's vaccine likely to be approved for distribution soon by the FDA. And yet these stocks are lower. Now they're up, or at least Moderna is, I should say, up on the year. So a little bit of sell the news. The question, though, is whether or not that means some volatility ahead for the broader indexes. Right now, not so much, though. Stocks, again, on the week, Emily, higher.
Right, and both of those companies still have seen incredible rises over the year. We are waiting for that approval of Moderna momentarily, officially by the FDA. Abigail Doolittle, thank you so much for that roundup. Now, moving on to the massive hack on the U.S. government and other critical institutions around the world. Microsoft now says its systems were also exposed to the malware used in the Russia-linked hack, targeting U.S. states and government agencies. Cyber experts everywhere are still scrambling to better understand what happened. To discuss, we're joined now by Microsoft President Brad Smith. Brad, thank you so much for joining us. You had a lengthy blog post out calling this attack a moment of reckoning. And you say that the level of recklessness here is not just espionage as usual. Why is this so alarming to you?
Well, I think it's alarming in the first instance because it's so sophisticated and its reach is so broad, and it is reckless. It's reckless because it put at risk the technology supply chain, frankly, for the global economy, because malware was injected into software from a network management company that then was installed in 18,000 organizations around the world. In effect, it unlocked the door, so to speak, so that a foreign government could then attempt to enter. And what we have identified is that it did, in fact, enter into more than 40 organizations around the world, a number that clearly will rise because this investigation is still in early days. And that included agencies across the United States government. It included think tanks and tech firms. It included institutions in 8 countries. And while it did not penetrate Microsoft products or services, we've seen no indication that they were made vulnerable or used as a source of attack. We do have more than 500 security engineers this week working with these customers around the world to identify these threats and help restore their security.
Now, what makes it so scary is folks who were updating their software, doing what they thought they were supposed to do to keep their networks up to date and safe. Those were the folks who were compromised. You say that the attack is still ongoing. What exactly is still happening out there right now?
Well, what is happening right now is that people are working to identify all of the organizations where this software may have been installed, this malware may have been injected. And that takes time, both because there are so many organizations globally and because this actor was so sophisticated, is so sophisticated. So it takes time for security engineers and threat intelligence analysts to sift through the network logs and all of the other sources of information they need to inspect to determine whether there are continuing attacks within a specific organization. It's the kind of thing that typically in something like this, will take some weeks. Maybe it'll spill into some months. It will require that many people, after a very long year, now spend their holidays working with our customers around the world.
Now, in your statement, you say that you found SolarWinds binaries in Microsoft networks. Does that mean that Microsoft downloaded the impacted software that had this backdoor or giant hole in it, or that hackers actually entered your system through that backdoor?
It's the first. It means that in a few instances, we identified the malware in SolarWinds software on our computers, but we were able to do additional work, and we're still investigating, to be clear. But we found no indications that the attackers were able to go from that point to create vulnerabilities in our products or services. As you would expect, we have so many security precautions, in fact, to prevent an attacker from jumping from one place to another. We probably have more security in place than almost any organization, public or private, on the planet. But we still are investigating very carefully ourselves to satisfy ourselves that we, too, have no additional vulnerabilities.
So of those 18,000 customers, what are the chances? How many, what proportion of those customers, you say to be prepared for more victims, but what proportion of those customers do you think could have been compromised here, where the hackers actually got in that back door that had been downloaded?
Well, right now we've identified more than 40. We're going to see that go up. I'll be surprised if this is something in the thousands. It's more likely to be between several dozen and several hundred. What these attackers clearly are interested in, it would appear, is the intelligence that they can extract from the United States government, from other governments that are American allies, from think tanks that are working on issues that are of interest to them, and of security firms. And I think from that perspective, they perhaps are interested in what the security firms know about them, how they're trying to protect people's networks so they can use that information in the future. It's the kind of attack that has a lot of potential ripple effects, and we should keep that in mind. Ultimately, it affects all of us, whether we work in one of these institutions or not, because we all depend on the security, say, of the United States government. So it's something that we all need to take seriously, regardless of whether we're directly impacted or not.
Federal officials, folks at CISA, are saying that this same hacking group is using other vectors. Based on what you're seeing, other ways besides SolarWinds? Have you identified yet any other potential vectors out there?
Well, I think it's far too early in this investigation to conclude one way or the other about the applicability of additional vectors. It's certainly something that we're actively assessing. Others in government are as well. I think, in my mind, that really points, Emily, to one of the most important lessons we should take away from this. And one of the points that I made is we should all go back and read the report of the 9/11 Commission. 9/11 occurred in part, almost in principal part, as that commission concluded, because there wasn't this broad sharing of intelligence data. And we've done many things in the last 20 years to learn from that. We increased our ability to protect against traditional terrorist threats. CISA itself, I think, created a model for the protection of our elections that worked very well, sharing data with the private sector. But we have to now apply that and take it to heart to cybersecurity protection more broadly. We need better sharing of data across the federal government, more sharing of data between the government and the tech sector. We need to collaborate more closely. And that is the only way that we're going to start to take many other steps that we need to take to strengthen the nation's defenses.
So are you saying the United States or the world, we're at risk of another 9/11 at this point, or the 9/11 of hacks?
We live with that risk every day. And the sooner we look that in the face with clear eyes and take the kinds of steps that we need to better protect the country and the world, the better served we will be. I think we're going to need to invest more resources, especially on the civilian side of the United States government. I think we need to put in place new processes and give particular parts of the government more authority than they have today. We need to take what we've learned from the past and create a culture of information sharing so that we not only are sharing information as we do with the government, but that we get more information back from various parts of the government, all obviously with appropriate safeguards for national security and people's privacy. But only if we take this to heart and put these measures in place can we have the basis to be optimistic that we're going to do a better job.
Now, Russia has simply denied this. President Trump hasn't really said anything. And I'm curious, how much do you believe this particular administration has made the U.S. more vulnerable in cyberspace than prior administrations, given our relationship with Russia?
Well, I think there are certain steps that this administration has taken that have made us stronger, including more coordinated public attribution, and I would say especially the work that CISA did around the election. But we need to do a lot more, not just in information sharing, but by strengthening our laws. And I think we need to recognize that this is not a world of technology where any government can successfully defend itself by acting alone. We need to look to a better and more coordinated multilateral response. And this is, I think, a priority of the incoming Biden administration. That is good news, because just as we won World War II with allies coming together, we triumphed during the Cold War. If we are going to protect the nation and our allies from these kinds of cyber threats, we have to do more to work together.
So what would you like to see from President-elect Biden and the Biden administration?
I think we'd like to see several things. Number one, let's focus on how intelligence is shared across the government and with the private sector. Number two, let's look at where we need to put more resources in place in particular parts of the government, especially on the civil side of the government, so that there is greater capability. Number three, let's ensure that these parts of the government have the authority they need under the law to aggregate data across the government with leadership in a centralized place. We do get very effective leadership on the national security side today from, say, the NSA. And I think they've done a real service to the world this week with the kind of information that they have shared. But we need more of that kind of expertise on the civil side as well. Number four, let's look at our laws and how we can strengthen them. And then finally, we need a strong, broad, really comprehensive foreign policy so that the administration will have the right tools to appropriately respond and hold others accountable when these attacks take place. That's a broad agenda, but it's a critical agenda, and I think it needs to be really pursued with a sense of urgency.
What is your understanding of what the current administration is doing? Has the Trump administration reached out to Microsoft at all, or vice versa?
Well, we've reached out to multiple parts of the federal government because as we see agencies that have been attacked and compromised, we notify them. We've certainly been in closer contact with key parts of the government, most especially CISA and the NSA, where there are really capable, dedicated people hard at work. We clearly need to do more as a nation, as a government, in a more coordinated and comprehensive way. I think we should recognize this isn't a problem that's going to be solved in days or weeks. This is going to be high on the list, I think, for President Biden on January 20th when he is inaugurated.
All right. Brad Smith, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and for your blog post. Microsoft President Brad Smith there on this hack that is still unfolding. All right, coming up, Bitcoin's rally continuing, but will the momentum last? We'll get one investor's outlook next. This is Bloomberg. Bitcoin blew past the $20,000 mark this week, reaching all-time highs and seeing its biggest rally since 2017. In an exclusive front row interview, Kathy Wood of ARK Investment Management spoke with our Eric Schatzker about her outlook on the crypto market and the technology behind it.
We are extremely bullish. Our confidence in it has gone up since 2017 because what we saw as it dropped from 20,000 to below 4,000, it actually got well into the threes, I think in 2019, was that Bitcoin's share of the crypto asset ecosystem moved from the low 30% range in terms of value, network values, into the low 70% range. And what did that tell us? That confirmed in our mind that Bitcoin is the reserve currency of the crypto asset ecosystem. So it is the reserve cryptocurrency, which is a very important role. It's the flight to safety currency. It is Bitcoin's technology or Bitcoin's blockchain is the most secure of any other blockchain. And so it makes sense that Bitcoin would be the reserve currency of the crypto asset ecosystem.
Kathy Wood there of ARK Investment. You can check out more of that interview at Bloomberg.com. All right, coming up with holiday shopping in full swing, we are going to take a look at how retailers are handling the busy period and last-minute purchases, all of that next. This is Bloomberg. Shoppers in the United States are in the final sprint of a record year of e-commerce spending, filling their digital carts with holiday gifts when public health concerns are keeping folks away from physical stores. With us to discuss how 2020 has been for retailers and will end, Deborah Weinswig, founder and CEO of CoreSite Research in our Retail Transforms series. Deborah, thank you so much. So, look, how's this holiday season going so far online, and how do you expect the last few days to play out?
Well, I think everyone's nail-biting in terms of packages being delivered on time. What we're seeing is that 15.3% of consumers expect to spend more than last year. That's the highest level we've seen since July. So consumers are feeling quite good. And what we're also seeing, of course, is buy online, pick up in store, curbside pickup, with many retailers saying that over 70% of packages are being fulfilled out of their stores right now, just due to the tight supply chains and time. But that's a positive. We are seeing people going to the stores. They're staying in their car. They're picking up at curbside. But we are definitely seeing the stores as fulfillment centers right now.
I barely have any nails left, thanks to all the nail biting waiting for these packages. More online shopping could mean more returns. Will that all go smoothly?
That is my biggest concern, especially as CoreSite is very focused on sustainability, is just what we're seeing with regards to the potential for returns. We have seen many retailers make returns incredibly easy, and I mean that in a very positive way, where we'll get the product back into the store and back onto the shelves quickly and much, quicker than in years past. And I think that is the, kind of icing on the cake. The concern is, of course, just, those items that cannot be resold. We are seeing that retailers are doing whatever they can to be as accommodating as possible, gearing up customer service associates to also better inform customers before they buy, with the hopes that we see less returns this holiday season.
So how does retail look different out of the pandemic? 2021, what's your outlook?
I think that we continue to see very strong online. Of course, we will have consumers return to stores, but you've had consumers who never shopped online before, let's call it the 55 and over set. But what's also been unbelievable is the significant increase in penetration in millennials, right, who are now buying, every category online. I do think that we will see stores more as showrooms and live streaming, social commerce, where you're using your store associates as your salespeople, but online with more data, with more intelligence, able to give customers what they need when they need it. So I think what we'll see is this idea around data and artificial intelligence driving greater sales, and hopefully in the 21 period, we see less returns as a result of it.
All right, CoreSite Research founder and CEO Deborah Weinswig, thank you so much for stopping by. Certainly an eventful few days it will be going into 2021. All right, coming up, CrowdStrike CEO will join us to talk about how grave the risk the cyber attack suspected by Russian hackers poses to U.S. national security, what companies can do to better protect their systems from future threats. That is next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. As we have been covering, the U.S. government and various agencies and hundreds of companies are still assessing the damage done by the cyber attack by suspected Russian hackers. Joining us now to discuss, George Kurtz, CEO of the cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike. The company is among the cybersecurity firms best positioned to win business in the aftermath of this hack, according to UBS Security. CrowdStrike co-founder and CEO George Kurtz with us now, and CrowdStrike's shares, George, were up. Actually, on that note, first of all, CISA saying this attack represents a grave risk to our national security. Describe that risk for us. How vulnerable are we right now?
Well, Emily, I think it's a watershed event for security. We've talked about supply chain risk for some time. We've seen it with the NotPetya attack in 2017. And this is one of the most sophisticated attacks that we've seen ever. Incredibly patient, incredible tradecraft, and lots of companies potentially impacted, including the government. So I think it really shines a light on how interwoven our economy is in the physical world and the digital world, and how important cybersecurity is in our daily lives.
Now, we hear hack attacks all the time, and I think it's really hard for, sort of regular people to understand the threat. It seems like, this is, sort of always happening in cyberspace. What makes this hack in particular so pernicious?
Well, the hard part for most folks to really understand in the electronic world is what's happening. If there was a nuclear explosion somewhere, someone would obviously see that and have a reaction to it. What happens behind the scenes as electrons flow about is tough, but This is a massive attack, a long sustained campaign with tradecraft that was superb. So it's hard for the average person to really understand it, but to have this level of access for so long across so many different companies is probably unprecedented. And I think it really shines a light on how important cybersecurity is, and the fact that it's not about just having a system that's infected. It really gets to the business resiliency question that companies are often grappling with at the board level.
Now, we're still trying to get a handle on just how many companies, agencies, entities were impacted here. SolarWinds has said, 18,000 customers potentially downloaded this software, but it is a smaller subset of that that actually hackers got in through the back door. I just spoke with Microsoft President Brad Smith. Microsoft also noticed the fingerprints of the hackers inside their system, but said they didn't get through that back door. Take a listen to what he had to say about what he thinks the scale of this will be.
Right now, we've identified more than 40. We're going to see that go up. I'll be surprised if this is something in the thousands. It's more likely to be between several dozen and several hundred.
George, would you agree with that the number of entities where the hackers actually got in that back door will be somewhere between, several dozen and several hundred?
Well, I think there's a bit of good news here. You've got 18,000 potential customers that SolarWinds has, and this was a very targeted attack. I think the vast majority of them won't see an activation of that malware or hadn't seen an activation of that malware over that period of time. Obviously, everyone's encouraged to upgrade, and SolarWinds has been very transparent in trying to get this fixed and work with their customers. But that being said, I think it's going to take some time, weeks or longer, to figure out if there is an impact, if people actually had this vulnerable version. And I think that's why it's important for companies to have the right level of security and visibility on their endpoints and workloads to understand what's actually happening there, and then be able to go back in time forensically if they need to investigate if there was a potential incident. So it's a pretty fluid situation, and I think it's going to be an evolving situation over the next coming weeks and perhaps months.
Okay, so given the extended timeline, President Trump hasn't commented on this issue at all. President-elect Biden says it will be a top priority. He's not taking office for a month. Is that too late?
Well, I think the government folks are doing the best job they can in identifying this and working through the various agencies. Again, this was such a sophisticated attack. It takes time. Where do you have those vulnerable versions? Have they been activated? Has someone moved about the network? It all takes time and investigative power to do that. And again, I know, unfortunately, a lot of folks are going to be working over the holidays to figure out if there's really any impact, and hopefully it's much lower than we think, but we'll know over the coming weeks.
Now, CrowdStrike shares have been up every day over the last week, in part because of the role that you can play in helping protect companies from future attacks. But what does this actually mean for your business?
Well, I think what it shows in terms of security in general is that it's equivalent to shelter. It's in the hierarchy of needs. You have to have it. And whether there's a vaccine or not, whether people are working from home or not, security is only going to get bigger and bigger in terms of a necessary element for companies. Digital transformation, keeping their customers safe, keeping their data safe. And I think what it also shows is that the threat environment continues to evolve. It's hand-to-hand combat with the adversaries. They get good, we have to be better, and we go back and forth. But technologies that leverage artificial intelligence and the power of the cloud, I think, have a much greater advantage in trying to identify and prevent these sort of breaches.
Now, SolarWinds was, at least as far as we know right now, the primary vector here. But doesn't this mean that basically any company that provides software could be a vector for a hack of this nature on this scale?
Well, that's the hard part with a supply chain attack, because it's injected in the top level of supply chain and the software, and it becomes very difficult to detect these. And that's why it's incumbent on all vendors to be able to look at their build process, their own security, to make sure they have things locked down. We've seen this attack, a similar attack in 2017. That was a destructive attack, but it gave the world, I think, a glimpse, the NotPetya attack I'm referring to. It gave the world a glimpse of what can happen in a supply chain attack. And that's why it's so nasty. And the thing is, they were very patient. They waited, they activated when they needed to. They blended in from an identity perspective like every other user. And identity security is really important as well. It's one of the reasons why we did our Preempt acquisition to really focus on identity security and locking down directories. And I think that shows how important it is to companies. It's not only about the malware, it's also about the identity and the directories, which have to be protected.
Now, in terms of the impact, I mean, the understanding is these hackers have now stolen such a large amount of personal data. That means, potentially huge disinformation campaigns at a super targeted scale. What are the actual consequences of a hack like this? What consequences will this particular hack have?
I think that remains to be seen. It's one of those in the fog of war. You understand one particular battle. You don't know what the war is going to look like. And I think as more and more information comes out on the size and scale and sophistication, we're going to see a greater impact. Was data stolen? Was IP stolen? Were there other supply chains compromised? I think it's just too early to tell. Obviously, there isn't an IT group on the planet who isn't looking at their systems now, trying to understand whether they had that software, whether there was an impact, and whether data was stolen or whether there's malicious activity that took place. And that's the hard part about this. Not only can data be stolen, but these sort of attacks can be implemented in a way that you can actually destroy systems or destroy data, which again gets back to my point about business resiliency, right? It's not just about data theft. It's about keeping your business safe and up and running, which is really top of mind for all boards right now.
So you released a report earlier this month talking about the staggering volume of attacks this year. What awaits us in 2021? What will the threat landscape look like?
Well, it's unfortunately every year we go through these predictions, us and every other security company, and it keeps getting worse. And it gets worse in the area of sophistication of the adversary. If you take e-crime as an example, it's a massive, probably $1 trillion business at this point. And what we've seen is that the adversary has been able to take a lot of the nation state tradecraft and even exploits that have been leaked on the internet and weaponize those and deliver them in the form of ransomware. And there is a massive business in the ransomware business, taking systems down, extorting companies for big dollars. And it isn't $300 and you're up and running. It's $3 million, it's $5 million, it's $10 million where these ransoms are coming in. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that because it's big business and low risk. And then, we're going to see a lot more on the nation states. I mean, I think this is going to wake a lot of people up to say, what else is going on? Where else do we need to look?
All right. George Kurtz, CEO and co-founder of CrowdStrike. George, really appreciate having your perspective on this hack as it continues to unfold. Thank you. Coming up, we're looking closer at the states that are banding together against Google and why so many are now accusing the search giant of wrongdoing. That is next. This is Bloomberg. Google's dominance in online search is under its broadest attack yet, as 38 states have filed lawsuits, including Colorado, Iowa, and New York. I spoke with Maura Healey, Attorney General of the state of Massachusetts, yesterday and asked her to make the case about Google's alleged wrongdoing.
Unfortunately, what we've seen from these two big tech companies, Facebook and then more recently here Google, is efforts to engage in anti-competitive conduct, monopolistic conduct that had the effect of killing competition, of hurting consumers, and hurting small businesses.
Joining me now for a closer look at these lawsuits and why so many states are banding together, Activate co-founder and CEO Michael Wolff. Michael, these lawsuits taken together along with the antitrust suit that's been filed by the Department of Justice may be the biggest threat Google has ever faced to its business. How big a threat is it in your view?
I really don't think these are threats to the business. I think to a large extent, These will end up as fines, but this is not like Microsoft having to separate off from Internet Explorer 20 years ago. In a lot of cases, consumers can just decide to use another browser. I mean, some of the issues come down to, though, their control, Google's control of advertising. And over time, that could be impacted. The bigger issue is when you look at Google, Facebook, and Amazon, they only have a third of all internet traffic, but they today capture 2/3 of all internet advertising. And so, of course, some of these efforts will chip away at it, but I don't think that they're going to be totally harmful in the long run for Google.
Google makes the case that, as you say, customers can simply choose to use other products, but they choose to use Google. I mean, do you think the government has it wrong here? Is Google not a threat?
I think Google is a threat. I think that the question is how much will the Justice Department or these state lawsuits really impact Google's practices? We have to recognize Google dominates search. It's an activity that people use every day, multiple times a day. And although there may be some practices, it's ultimately not going to dramatically change Google's business or Google's stranglehold on search.
Lawsuits have also been filed by the government against Facebook. There's scrutiny of Apple. There's scrutiny of Amazon. Yes. Do you think any one of these companies in particular is in a worse position than the others?
I think some of the suits really will undermine people's confidence. So I think the suit that was filed yesterday by Texas and 10 other states about Facebook and Google colluding, and I think those are going to be issues that ultimately could impact advertisers as well as consumers. But I think overall, I doubt that there's any one of these in particular. I think the bigger issue is not just the lawsuits. I think the bigger issue is just even the conflicts. So you have Facebook and Apple now fighting over Apple's requirement that people give permission to be tracked across apps. These are issues that as these companies get bigger, it's going to be squabbles between them, not just with the government.
Now, Michael, you are constantly looking at trends, trying to figure out what's here to stay and what is just a flash in the pan. Based on 2020, clearly an unprecedented year, will certainly lead to permanent changes in some behaviors, but other behaviors will go back to normal. What do you think is here to stay that is a new trend we have seen in 2020?
A couple of things. I think, first of all, if you look at during shelter in place this time, usage of gaming, of video gaming, has gone way up. And I mean, it's not surprising. People wanted to be in a cyber world, have gameplay, and also be social. I think that's going to continue to increase. And in fact, all of the major tech platforms, all the major companies, they're going to want to be in the game business even more. I think we should expect to see mergers between the biggest companies and gaming companies. I think the second thing is that virtual reality has now hit the mainstream. If you look at within the first 5 months of the shelter in place, 56% of all VR headsets were sold. In other words, everybody who owns a VR headset today, 56% of them were bought in shelter in place. So we're going to see this year the VR world really explode. And it's going to be exciting, the number of applications that are there. And I think overall, the other thing that's here to stay is that the overall, the amount of time that people are spending with technology and media has increased. It's increased by almost an hour a day, and it's going to continue. People are not going back to old habits. And finally, online grocery, it's grown in 5 months. It grew ahead 5 years. And everyone's going to be buying more of their groceries online, and more people are going to be using online for every type of shopping you can imagine.
Well, I know, unfortunately, we have been playing more video games in this household and definitely ordering more groceries online. We will be watching for all of that. Michael Wolff, Activate founder and CEO. Thank you so much for sharing your future thoughts with us. Okay, still ahead. Tech meets the dating world. In the latest edition of Bloomberg Studio 1.0, we're going to bring you a special conversation with Bumble CEO and co-founder Whitney Wolfe Herd. Amid reports the popular dating app has filed to go public. That is next. This is Bloomberg. The popular dating app Bumble is the latest in a string of tech companies filing for an IPO, according to people familiar with the matter. Sources say the listing could come around Valentine's Day next year. I recently caught up with Bumble founder and CEO Whitney Wolfe Herd for the latest edition of Bloomberg Studio 1.0. She weighs in on the app's global growth, empowering women, and lessons learned as an entrepreneur.
Our partnership with Blackstone is absolutely incredible. I have so much respect and admiration for the team there, for their leadership, for their incredible support and championing of us, both as a team and as a business. It has really been the highlight of my entire career to work with Blackstone. It has been a remarkable success story. From a private equity and high growth tech business standpoint, and there's not so many of those. So it was a bit of a unique match, but it has been absolutely sensational. And they have really given us a wide range of resources and support, ranging from helping us scale our talent to placing our board, to helping us dig deeper into data analytics and really doubling down on privacy and security, and coming in and really helping us just really further accelerate the business from every side. And I have a great partnership with the folks over there, and it has really been a remarkable opportunity.
There's been talk about an IPO, a $6 to $8 billion IPO. Does Blackstone's involvement now change the path forward?
So I cannot comment on the future prospect of a potential IPO, but I can tell you that we are working hand in hand every day, Blackstone and Bumble, to pursue the best future outcome for the business. And we love our partnership, and we stay very close on all future potential opportunities. We're a high growth business, and so we're exploring all options.
Now, Tinder, along with all the other dating apps, is now your competition. So why should people use Bumble when there are now, pick your flavor, Coffee Meets Bagel, Hinge, The League, all of these other options out there?
We fundamentally believe that the way a relationship starts is very suggestive of how it will end. And we're really trying to recalibrate the way relationships begin so they can become more healthy, more equitable, more long-lasting. And when a woman makes the first move, she really establishes control and has an equal footing from the very first hello. And that's what we really fundamentally believe sets us apart from a product standpoint. Even if you saw the same person on 5 products, on Bumble, saying hello first changes the course of the way that relationship will go and the way that conversation will go. And it really does just promote more healthy and equitable relationships for all.
Any dating app has the problem that once you create a successful match, those people don't need the app anymore, certainly don't need to pay a subscription. How do you reconcile that and keep making money?
That is an issue for certain dating apps, but we are not just a dating app. We offer so many other verticals inside our product, and we see that our users and our customers really come for more than just dating. We have a large sector of our user base that comes and uses all 3 modes, which is dating, friend finding, and business opportunities.
Does that mean then you're competing with Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and Snapchat? And how do you compete?
What's really interesting about the Instagrams and the Facebooks and the Snapchats of the world, you're communicating with your friends. That is a place you are keeping in touch with the network you already have. You are commenting on friends' photos and exchanging updates with one another. Bumble connects you to people you don't know yet. So Bumble is really what comes before social media. This is what is giving you a network. This is what is expanding your opportunities of who you know. This is introducing you to new people. And then down the road, you can engage with those folks on other social media platforms. So if Facebook is to people you know, Bumble is to people you don't.
My conversation there with Whitney Wolfe Herd, Bumble founder and CEO. You can catch the full interview on Studio 1.0, airing tonight, 11 p.m. Eastern Time, and this weekend across Bloomberg Television and all of our regions. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. We are live streaming on Twitter, of course. You can always check us out at Technology and follow our global breaking news network, Quick Take. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. Have a wonderful weekend, all. This is Bloomberg.